Hello everybody, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, and welcome back to Bun Plays, where I continue to add numerous different games into the haunted gaming library, as well as discover new lore about the Sonic franchise as I continue my journey through the classic era. Last time, we took a slight detour into the world of Sonic CD, which turned out to be better than I expected, with a lot to love about the game, but plenty of confusing choices, clunky level design, and the introduction of aliens and time travel to really complicate Sonic lore. However, it managed to win me over with some fantastic music, the freedom of the game's exploration, and some wonderful boss fights of the game. Sonic CD may not be the lost Sonic 3 that people might have hoped it'd be, but it is a stellar companion piece to Sonic 2. With that being said though, it is now time to dive into the true third entry in the series, and the final main entry we'll be tackling for this block of games. And given the fact that it can technically be considered two games in one, you are damn right in thinking that we have a lot of ground to cover today. So without any further ado, let's dive into Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, and see where this journey takes us. If you thought development on Sonic 2 was troubled, Sonic 3 exists in a whole new ballpark, because it is a saga of ambition, corporate interference, and poor timing. The year was 1993, and Sonic 2 had released to universal acclaim in North America 2 months prior. However, while the game was a sales juggernaut and beloved by the masses, there was a ton of problems behind the scenes, which I detailed in the Sonic 2 primer, that needed to be addressed. As such, after Sonic 2 was completed, the first order of business was to split Sega Technical Institute into two teams. One consisted of American developers who would start work on Sonic Spinball, while the other, composed of Japanese developers, would focus on creating Sonic 3, the official third game in the series. Man, all the stars aligned for this one, didn't they? There were 3 Sonic teams at this point. Sonic 3 had 3 different releases, and there are 3 main characters in the game with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. I guess Sega just does what Valve hasn't. In any case, Sonic 3 was quite the ambitious project for the newly formed team. While Yuji Naka was not the director of the game, he is credited as its producer, since he and actual director Hirokazu Yasuhara created the design document and product schedule for the entire project. Naka also selected the majority of the team, while the newly appointed head of STI, Roger Hector, oversaw development of the game, and Pamela Kelly led marketing. So, while Naka was not in charge on paper, he basically shadow-ran the entire process and micromanaged things as he wished. Living up to that good Sega Mafia name, I see. According to Naka, the team felt they needed a deeper story to expand upon the world of Sonic, which, quote, made the project huge, end quote, with the levels being triple the size of Sonic 2. Yeah, this was quite the ambitious project, and this was just the beginning. Initially, the team planned to use the new Sega Virtual Processor chip, allowing for 3D graphics in an isometric view. They created a prototype with isometric graphics under the working title Sonic 3D, with the original special stage featuring a polygonal Sonic in a figure 8 shape. See? I told you that Sonic 3D Blast could technically be considered Sonic 3. I'm not crazy, damn it! In addition to the increase in level size and updated graphics, Naka wanted to focus on improving the music as well, leading to one of the craziest elements of Sonic 3's development cycle: the involvement of Michael Jackson. Jackson was a huge fan of Sonic and had a good relationship with Sega at the time, not only inspiring the Sonic character design, but also collaborating on the 1990 arcade game Moonwalker. It should also be noted that from the 80s to the early 90s, Jackson was the single biggest pop artist of the time period. Even when his popularity started to wane around the early 90s, he was still churning out big hits like Black or White and They Don't Care About Us, which cemented his status as the king of pop for multiple decades. It was a no-brainer that Naka would approach Jackson to create songs for his most ambitious project yet. However, this is where things get weird, because for nearly 30 years, we weren't actually 100% certain if Jackson was involved in this project at all, and how much of the songs were composed by him or his studio. You see, in August of 1993, sexual abuse allegations against Jackson began to be reported on by the media. As of 2023, even with numerous accusations against him, all cases have been dismissed, and Jackson has denied all allegations until his death in 2009. So, we do not know whether any of this was true, but the negative media against Jackson was clearly felt by Sega at the time. Until recently, there has been no concrete info about his involvement, and rumors have been flying around for 30 years. According to some involved in development, Jackson composed the Sonic 3 soundtrack completely, but this was later denied by senior Sega staff. In 2005, Hector said that Jackson had been hired to compose the music, and that Jackson's tour director at the time, Brad Buxer, assembled a team and worked on the project for 4 weeks at Record One in Los Angeles in 1993. According to Hector, they developed fully fledged tracks with extensive samples of Jackson beatboxing to be adapted for the Genesis, and they had a recognizable Jackson sound. According to Buxer, though, Jackson only worked on one of the 41 tracks the team composed, leading to widespread speculation that someone else created the entire soundtrack when Jackson left in the middle of the allegations. For many years, it was assumed that a ghost composer created tracks based on the samples that Jackson provided, since, according to Hector, Jackson's involvement was terminated following the allegations. But Buxer says the team received no such instructions to halt work. So, yeah, there were a lot of conflicting reports from every side of this project, and it only gets weirder the more we learned over time. Hector stated that Jackson's music had already been implemented in the game and had to be quickly reworked by Howard Drawson, a composer notable for his work with RZA, who had joined the project expecting to work with Jackson directly. Naoto Oshima, the co-creator of Sonic, said Jackson recorded an a cappella demo tape for the game, but Sega could not use the compositions due to the allegations. That said, Buxer and 2 other members of Jackson's team have also said that the music remained in the game. Jackson's team members also alleged that Jackson went uncredited because he was unhappy how the Genesis system replicated his tracks, which is weird since Sirocco Jones, a member of Jackson's sound team, credited himself along with Jackson and Buxer for musical cues for levels 2 and 3 of, quote, Sonic the Hedgehog, end quote, on his website. An anonymous source involved in development also told Game Trailers that Jackson's contributions, such as the Carnival Night Zone theme, remained, and that he had chosen to remain uncredited. In 2013, it was discovered that the music for Ice Cap Zone was derived from a previously unreleased 1982 song, Hard Times, by Buxer's band The Jetsons, leading to speculation that Buxer ghost-wrote the songs instead of Jackson, although that contradicts speculation in later years that Sonic 3 had been re-released less frequently due to legal issues with the Jackson estate. I mean, the game would have been easier to receive proper remakes and ports if it was all just ghost-written by Buxer. Senior Sega staff, including the Sega of America president, Tom Kalinske, said that any involvement of Jackson was arranged without their knowledge, and that no contracts nor formal agreements were ever made. In 2013, Hector said that any similarities to Jackson's music in Sonic 3 were unintentional, which further makes me scratch my head since he made all those earlier contradictory statements in 2005 confirming that they were based on his songs. Journalist Ken Horowitz raised questions about Jackson's alleged involvement, such as how an agreement between Sega and Jackson could have been kept secret from the media, why Sega's marketing never mentioned Jackson's involvement, and why Jackson would reuse music originally composed for a video game, but nothing concrete was brought forth. Other tracks were composed by Sega sound team members, such as Jun Sano, who became a regular composer for the series. With the release of the 1997 PC bundle, titled the Sonic and Knuckles Collection, all of Jackson's alleged contributions were replaced with seemingly new tracks. And while emulated ports of Sonic 3 in bundles such as Sonic Mega Collection and Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection would leave the music untouched, the new tracks were what were ultimately used for the Sonic Origins release, albeit with new arrangements made for them entirely. These compositions were made for Carnival Night Zone, Ice Cap Zone, Launch Base Zone, the Mini-Boss theme, and Knuckles theme. Heck, when playing the game via Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the Mini-Boss and Knuckles themes have always been replaced with the new tracks first heard in Sonic and Knuckles. With that said, an interesting discovery was made with a Sonic 3 prototype that was discovered in 2019 that featured these alternate tracks, which insinuates that this was the original music all along prior to Jackson's involvement. However, much to everyone's surprise, in 2022, out of nowhere and completely unprovoked, Naka confirmed on Twitter with photographic evidence that Jackson had been involved and said that the development team had visited Jackson's home at Neverland Ranch, even expressing surprise that Sega did not use Jackson's music in Sonic Origins. Holy crap. That was a big rabbit hole, and that was just the music composition of the game. It took 30 years, but we finally have confirmation that Michael Jackson did compose these tracks, and his involvement was covered up due to the allegations. Then again, that's to be expected when a smooth criminal works with the Mafia. That said, we haven't even gotten through all of the development woes and controversies, but I do think we need a bit of a breather after all of that, so let's take a step back and talk a bit more about Sonic CD. Yeah, I know I discussed this in depth already, but there's a few bits of history that I saved for this primer. Most notably, the introduction of speedruns with time attack mode. I briefly mentioned this during the First Impressions video, but Sonic CD was the first game in the series to introduce time attack, which allowed you to go back to any stage individually and challenge yourself to complete it as fast as possible. Now, Sonic CD was not the first game to utilize the fundamentals of speedrunning, since that can be attributed to the 1977 game Drag Race, but I would argue that Sonic CD was instrumental in popularizing it for gaming. Many people cite Doom and Quake as the big speedrunning boom of the 90s, but I would argue that Sonic did it better with time attack, and it has been a staple in Sonic games ever since. Time attack just allows you to blast through any stage as fast as possible, and including special stages increases the variety of the game. I can't find much information about what inspired its creation though. Naoto Oshima stated that for Sonic CD, and I quote, "Our ideas were to make the world and setting larger, and to add more replayability so it would be something you can enjoy playing for a long time," end quote. But honestly, it's just a no-brainer. Sonic goes fast, why not create a mode to increase replayability of the game where you race against your own times? This is what Sonic 2 was honestly missing. Forget multiplayer, forget co-op, CD allows you to race against yourself, and that was a ton of fun for me to get into for this video. In later releases, you can even unlock artwork and other special features by getting faster times, which adds even more incentive and replayability to the game. Another thing that I want to discuss here is the origins of Amy Rose and Metal Sonic. Unfortunately, there wasn't much lore I could find about their design this time around. I try not to look too deep into characters until I make the primer, but here there's not too much to them. Amy and Metal were both designed by Kazuyuki Hoshino, who was an artist who worked for Sonic Team, but there really wasn't much to their designs according to my research. Although Hoshino created Amy's in-game graphics, many staff members contributed ideas to her design. Her headband and trainer shoes reflected Oshima's tastes, while her mannerisms reflected the traits that Hoshino looked for in women at the time. Meanwhile, Hoshino designed Metal Sonic in response to Oshima wanting a strong rival for Sonic himself. Hoshino had a clear image of Metal Sonic in his mind from the moment he was briefed, and his design emerged after only a few sketches. And honestly, I think I can see why. Yeah, I know Sonic CD technically takes place after 1, since artist Yasushi Yamaguchi said it could be set between Sonic 1 and 2, which Origins later confirms, but CD was originally intended as a port of Sonic 2. Personally, I think Hoshino took the design of Silver Sonic from 2 and just upgraded it to be more intimidating and have an actual paint job this time around. It's a great design, but I really wish we had more information on what it was based around. Altogether, a far cry from the Bill Clinton and Kitsune lore from last time. Back on the subject of Sonic 3, you may be wondering why I keep calling it 3 separate games, and why I started the video by calling it Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Well, Naka was incredibly ambitious on this project, and Hector made sure it was ready to go out the door on time. They found out midway through that he was too ambitious for his own good. Shortly into the project, it was clear that the game was far too big to meet their February 1994 deadline, and they couldn't miss it because they had made a huge McDonald's tie-in promotion involving toys and other collectibles. In addition, the game was too big for the limitations of the cartridge itself, and that caused further issues. Top brass at Sega were committed to the deadline and couldn't change it, but Naka refused to abandon the scope of the project this time around, so a compromise had to be made. Instead of one large game, Sonic 3 would be split into 2 smaller games. Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which released in February for the deadline, and Sonic & Knuckles, which released in October that same year. The game was essentially split in half to give the teams more time to create the game that they wanted while splitting the cost between 2 cartridges. There were 2 big promotional campaigns for both games, with Sonic & Knuckles releasing right alongside Donkey Kong Country. Industry figures called the coinciding releases a battle, as both utilized revolutionary technology in their design. Country, with its 3D rendered graphics that blew everyone out of the water, and Knuckles with its lock-on technology. You see, Sonic Team was very upset that their game was going to be incomplete. So, in order to give players the completed game in its full scope as originally envisioned, they designed Sonic & Knuckles to work in tandem with Sonic 3. If you plugged in either game on their own, certain features would be missing, such as Knuckles not being playable in Sonic 3, while Tails and the new save feature were absent in Sonic & Knuckles, which is a travesty if you ask me. However, thanks to a port added on top of the cartridge for Knuckles, you could play Sonic 3 on top and unlock the game Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the game they had planned to make from the start. Now, I know the novelty of lock-on technology is probably lost in an age where DLC is the norm, but honestly, if you told me about this as a kid, this would have blown my little mind. And it didn't stop at Sonic 3. What happens if you put Sonic 2 into the cartridge? It unlocks Knuckles in Sonic 2. Other games unlock more variations of the special stages in Sonic 3, known as Blue Sphere, with Sonic 1 in particular unlocking a crap ton of levels. Speaking of Sonic 1, a version of the game that was compatible with the lock-on was planned, but ultimately scrapped given that Tails and Knuckles gameplay was too different for Sonic 1's level design. Didn't stop Christian Whitehead 20 years later though, because I've actually played it, and it was awesome. In any case, this was a big deal at the time, and while I do think they shot themselves in the foot a bit by being so ambitious and having 2 releases in 1 year, I do think this was quite a revolutionary idea. At the same time, I can imagine many people were either burnt out or didn't know about all these Sonic releases. I never even heard about Sonic 3, and the Sonic and Knuckles title makes it sound like a side game like Sonic CD. Not to mention that you had so many releases back to back to back to back. Sonic 2, CD, Spinball, 3, Sonic and Knuckles, and a bunch of Game Gear titles all within about 2 years of each other, most likely created brand oversaturation and led to audience fatigue. Not to mention, if you didn't get Sonic and Knuckles, none of the lock-on technology worked. So you technically got a worse game for the same price, and the price of all of these games individually was astronomical at the time. Looking back on it in hindsight, it's pretty obvious why Donkey Kong Country won the battle with a full franchise, and Sonic struggled from this point onwards. In any case, that is why Sonic 3 is technically 3 games in 1. You could play Sonic 3 as is, but you miss out on half the content of the game. You could play Sonic and Knuckles, but several features of 3 are just gone. Most people consider Sonic 3 and Knuckles the actual game, and review it that way, which is how I'm personally going to approach it, since this is my first time playing the game. Yeah, I have absolutely no history with Sonic 3 or Knuckles. I hadn't heard about them, and for reasons that I will get into next time, I thought Sonic 3D Blast was the 3rd game in the series. Yes, I am completely serious about that. I played 1 and 2 as a kid, and thought it went right to 3D Blast. Oh, what a sweet summer child I was back then. Either way, I have never seen a playthrough of Sonic 3, and I don't really know what I'm in for. I saw Some Call Me Johnny's review of the game, but that really isn't enough to prepare me for something I haven't played myself. I'm going into this mostly blind, so I figure it'll be best to start off with the full experience as it was intended for Bun Plays. I will be playing through Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles individually after the Let's Play is completed, and before I script my first impressions, so I can accurately see what each game brought to the table, but I want this run to be special. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is often touted as one of the best games ever made and the best Sonic game in the entire franchise. That is a very bold claim, considering that Sonic 2 exists, and some people claim that Sonic & Knuckles is the best, but anything is possible at this point, now that we have confirmed that rolling is in fact real. In any case, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, and I will see you all next time when we dive into Sonic 3 and Knuckles and see just how awesome Knuckles himself is. Have a good one, everybody!